Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call the Richmond City Council meeting of Monday, February 13th, 2023 to order. May I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor, any opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions or deletions?
None, Your Worship.
All right, so the first item is a presentation from the Gateway Theatre. We'll welcome up Camilla Tibbs and Diane Purvey or whoever. Please introduce yourself and give us your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Mayor, City Council, and respected guests, my name is Diane Purvey, and I am the chair of the Board of Directors for the Richmond Gateway Theatre Society. With me are Executive Director Camilla Tibbs, and also present is Director of Artistic Programs Barbara Tomasic. I'd like to take a moment to thank my colleagues on the board for all of their work and recognize those who are outgoing. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of all of the Gateway staff and our amazing volunteers. Gateway has a large number of supporters from across the community, but first among them is the City of Richmond. For more than 40 years, the city has demonstrated a commitment to arts and culture by investing in Gateway. We very much appreciate that commitment and also the recent allocation of funds towards the technical equipment upgrades in the main stage theatre. I will now pass things over to Camilla Tibbs to tell you more about the past year at Gateway.
Thank you, Diane. I'd like to start by introducing you to our new branding. We're still in the process of rolling it out, but our new brand proposition is A Stage for Richmond, positioning Gateway as a place where our whole community can contribute to and benefit from the performing arts. The new branding has been a couple of years in the making, and it's reflective of the evolving identity of Gateway. To go with our fresh and vibrant new look, we have a new logo and wordmark, which can be used in several configurations and brand colors. Longtime Richmondites may recognize the arches from the original Gateway logo, and the overlapping arches or gateways in our current logo represent the intersection of cultures in our community. We've just launched a new website, and we are rolling out our other materials. So moving on to tell you about our programs, in early 2022, we offered 2 on-stage productions, Certified and In Wonderland, plus a family-friendly Lunar New Year installation experience. The second half of our year was all about song, with 2 Songs of Summer concerts on the lawn, one for families and one for adults, a free Culture Days concert with pop hits sung in English, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Japanese, plus the return of the community favorite, our holiday musical, this year, Anne of Green Gables. Under the heading of education, our academy continues to ramp up post-COVID. In 2022, Gateway Academy delivered more than 550 hours of education to a total of 238 students. We also cautiously resumed our high school outreach program, providing 4 Richmond drama classes with tickets to a production and an exclusive career-focused talk with artists and arts workers. Our rentals program is also gradually recovering. Pre-pandemic, we would host 30-plus rental clients each year, and in 2022, we were able to host 12. 2023 is looking more promising, and hopefully our community partners will be back in full force. A little bit of a financial update. We completed our last fiscal in June 2022 with a surplus. These additional funds allowed us to plan for a deficit for the current fiscal. And as I'll shortly share, revenues have not yet rebounded post-pandemic, so we'll likely plan for a deficit in the next fiscal also. So as most organizations, we're going through post-COVID ramifications and adjustments. The performing arts sector is experiencing all the same things that other industries are, but plus a couple of specific things to our sector. In terms of audiences, we are seeing a slow return. A lot of people lost the habit of going out to arts and culture events as part of their entertainment habits, and they're now doing different things. So we're connecting with similar organizations across North America in sharing ways to look for solutions and new ways of programming. Oh, I'm going to go forward, but there we go, stay here. In terms of staffing, we have a combination of challenges. One of the major things is that technical theatre workers, people like crew, stage managers, technicians, left the sector during the pandemic, in part because there was no work for them, and in part due to a shift in priorities and a desire to work more lifestyle-friendly and family-friendly hours. We're also identifying increasing challenges in recruiting and retaining staff, particularly in specialist roles like fundraising positions, financial positions, areas where it's hard for us to compete on salary. However, in the context of these challenges, we're moving forward with programming that will appeal to audiences in both new and familiar ways. We've just launched the first of a series of audio plays for children centered on lunar calendar festivities. In March, we have Prophecy Fog in Studio B by Indigenous artist Jani Lozon. And in April, Hey Viola tells the story of Black icon Viola Desmond, whose face graces our $10 bill, in a main stage musical production. We hope to see you there. And thank you for your support.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions here on my list, so I'll just say thank you to both of you. Thank you to the board, the staff, the volunteers. I know that you still have a very good group of volunteers, dedicated people who really make the experience quite a bit different, or quite a bit better. And always a smiling face on all those volunteers. So we do appreciate it. Same high-quality performance. We can see that there's some cultural shifts in here, but still it's the same high-quality theater that we've come to know and enjoy and expect, frankly. So thank you for both of you coming tonight. Thank you for your report. Good job. So with that, may I have a motion to resolve in the committee of the whole to hear delegations on items on the agenda? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. All right. So this is the time, if people are in the audience, if you want to speak to us on an item on the agenda, let's see your hands. Who would like to speak to us? Okay, so we have the gentleman in front and that person and the person at the back. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I get to those three people, we've been advised, these people are pre-registered, so we'll go to them first. First of all, we have Michael Sachs. Michael Sachs, please. Yes. So it's Rabbi Beidelman. Please come forward. So for the benefit of you and the others who may delegate, we ask that you start off with your introduction, your self-introduction, and tell us the item on the agenda to which you wish to speak, and you've got 5 minutes.
My name is Rabbi Yechiel Beidelman. I am the rabbi at Chabad Richmond. I am here to speak on the adoption of the Canada's anti-racism strategy, terminologies and definitions. His Worship, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today not only as a rabbi in this community, but as the son of a man who survived the Holocaust in Europe. My father of blessed memory was born during the Second World War in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, where his Polish-born parents had escaped. His father, my grandfather, was born in Lublin, and my grandmother in Krasnobrod, Poland. Neither of my grandparents spoke much of the nightmare they endured or the atrocities they suffered, and for the most part, their stories went to the grave with them. What we do know is that my grandfather's family was utterly decimated in the war. Of 12 brothers and sisters, he was the only one to survive. They have no graves, no tombstones. I know what human beings filled with hate are capable of. But my grandparents raised a generation of upstanding citizens and Jews. In their lifetime, they merited to see grandchildren. My grandmother saw great-grandchildren, and today there are well over 100 great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, descendants of my Zayda and Baba of my grandparents. Now, surely it is necessary to state that the Holocaust was different, that as much as the Jewish people relate to the sufferings of others and extend helping hands and contribute to relief and charity for all peoples of the world and for all nations, races, and religions, as we are seeing today, Israeli rescue teams in Turkey, still it must be said that Auschwitz was different and that the word Holocaust should never be used flippantly. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, spoke at the commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and at that event he said, and I quote, "The tragedy of the Jewish people was unique. The camps were not mere concentration camps. Let us not use the euphemism of those who built them. Their purpose was not to concentrate a people, a group in one particular place so as to keep an eye on them. It was to exterminate an entire people. Auschwitz was not a concentration camp or a mere work camp. It was a death camp with gas chambers to kill them and crematoria to burn their dead bodies. The Holocaust was not only a massacre, it was not only an act of genocide, it was a host of genocide factories." That being said, all hatred, from any human being to another, must be uprooted and healed. The great Jewish sage Maimonides, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon writes, and I quote, quoting from the Talmud, he says, referring to the 6 days of creation, "For this reason man was created alone as a single individual. As opposed to all other creatures where an entire species was created, the first human being was created as one single individual." The question is why? Why not create a human species? Explains Maimonides in a quote from the Talmud, "This teaches us that a person who eliminates one soul from the world is considered as if he eliminated an entire world. Conversely, a person who saves one soul is considered as if he saved an entire world. All the inhabitants of the world are created in the image of Adam, the first human being. And yet, no one person's face resembles the face of his colleague. And therefore, the Talmud continues, each person can say, I was created by God as a unique individual, and I have a unique, indispensable role to play in this world. And we must learn to see that uniqueness in every human being. We must see the godly image in each and every human being, no matter our differences. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, the late chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, made the following observation. The Rebbe of Chabad, my mentor, saw the fanatical hate of the Germans and of anti-Semitism. He saw the power of hate inspiring the Nazis to hunt down every last Jew in hate. The Rebbe did something absolutely extraordinary. He said to himself, if our enemies searched out every Jew in hate, we will search out every human being in love. This was the most radical response to the Holocaust ever conceived. We too must counter the hate in people's hearts with a love that will best and heal that hatred. Our divine destiny is to teach our children and their children to live, to flourish with kindness and goodness wherever we may be. And in doing so, we bring the world to its destiny, to the ultimate age of global peace and harmony, with an end to hatred, war, and bloodshed, and an end to terror and tyranny, to the great day of the final liberation of all of mankind, when God will finally wipe away the tears from all faces, the day of our redemption, the time of Mashiach, our righteous Redeemer. May it be speedily in our days.
Sir, we've got to ask you to wrap it up.
I urge passage of the motion to adopt Canada's anti-racism strategy, terminologies, and definitions to help inspire much love, care, and concern for every single human being. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yep. Mr. Sachs?
Good evening, Your Worship and City Council members. My name is Michael Sachs. I'm here to speak in favor of the motion to adopt Canada's anti-racism strategies, terminologies, and definitions. My name is Michael Sachs. I have been a resident of Richmond for over 7 years. I'm here to speak in favor of the motion of the anti-racism strategy. I sit here before you tonight as a resident, volunteer in my community, husband, proud Jew, but most of all, as a father of 2 young children. I will focus my time on the piece of the motion that I could speak to, anti-Semitism. As a father, I strive to help to create a Richmond that is free of hatred in all of its forms. I also speak up today so my children can grow up in a Richmond without fear of hatred in their schools, community, future workplaces, and their lives. The lived experience of our Richmond Jewish community has brought this day of reckoning. Whether it is the experience of one of our many Holocaust survivors who reside in Richmond, our large population of Jews from the Soviet Union who escaped anti-Semitism, members of our Orthodox community who are identifiably Jewish, or a Jewish youth who's attending one of our many public schools. We all have lived experience with anti-Semitism. Sadly, we all know that it is alive and well in our city, as well as other forms of hatred and discrimination. And that is why it is important for this council to send a clear message to all Richmond residents by adopting these definitions. Sadly, there are some who do not wish for our Jewish community and others to define their own oppression, and you need to ask yourself why. We have seen in the week leading up to this that there's no shortage of focus on the Jewish community. The proposed motion has 13 different definitions and terminologies, and yet the focus is going to be specifically on one. This in itself makes the case for the need of those definitions and terminologies. Let me be clear. No one can define anti-Semitism for us, and I would never try to define their discrimination for them. Thankfully, the motion in front of you provides a great first step towards a harmonious Richmond. Anti-Semitism is an issue that exists right here in our city, and therefore it is a Richmond issue. I do want to thank our Richmond Council and your worship for always condemning hatred and standing with us and others when hatred comes to the door, and for also advancing this motion. Tonight is the night where we tackle the issue of racism proactively. Recent years have provided an unfortunate but accurate analogy. Anti-Semitism and all other forms of racism and hate are like a virus that lives amongst us, one that needs proper identification, treatment, and education. Like many viruses, it has also evolved over time. The open Jew, Muslim, Asian, Black hatred seen in the early 1900s has morphed into something different today. We need to define what it is today, not what it was back then. That is why these definitions are so important. So to answer a question that had been posed by some, do we need 2 items talking about racism on the city agenda? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. One is to diagnose it. The other is the roadmap on how to deal with it. It is inevitable that there will be some opposition and those opposed who will claim that this is not supported by all of any community represented in the motion, or that the definitions stifle free speech. These efforts to push a wedge between us achieve only one thing: to divide us all. In regards to anti-Semitism, I will refer you to the united appeal from all Richmond Jewish organizations that actually represent your Richmond Jewish community. And all of them are here tonight. Our organized Richmond Jewish community is united in its requests and asks our friends to stand with us. To address the concerns of those opposed, stating that the definition stifles free speech, I refer them to the amendment by Councilman Chuck Au during the general purpose. Even today, Canada Heritage confirmed that they will not waver on the anti-racism strategy and specifically the definition of anti-Semitism. Our community thanks them for that stance as well. What you cannot do is use criticism as a veil to spread hatred of any minority group, and, in the case of my community, anti-Semitic tropes. Is that so much to ask? I'm getting the time. So I'll skip ahead and just say I thank you all for the opportunity to address you tonight. This is your moment to take a principled decision and pass this important motion. Thank you.
All right, we have a question, sir. Councillor Galanders.
Hi, Mr. Sachs.
Hi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming to speak. I just have a question. Is there, I think I heard this, and it might have been, Councillor Liu might have told me, or maybe it was when I talked to you. Was there an example of an act of hatred in our community where, in a school or something, where this definition would have been helpful because the boy was being,
In a Richmond school?
yes.
I can get you the information on it. It would be through actually the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, because they actually have the documentation for it. But
Oh,
there are stories of kids in high school and stuff like that being harassed, et cetera, under the veil of a political statement, when in actuality it was a racist statement, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, we'll go to you, yeah, Mr. Pack, and then you, and you. Sorry, I don't know the names, so.
Your Worship and councilors, thank you for having me here today. And my name is Ivan Pak. I'm one of the co-founder of the Stop Anti-Asian Hate Crime Advocacy Group. It was established 2 years ago, back in 2021. And it was in response for a Richmond coffee shop incident that involving suspect hurling racial slurs against shop manager with Asian descent. So our group has been advocating for social justice and racial equality ever since that date. And there's more things that we can do. So we are here tonight to speak and to address the council in support of the motions agenda here, number 15 and also number 21, both initiated by Councillor Alex Lowe and Councillor Chak Out. And we think there's more things that we can do together as a community that to fight against racism in any forms, that including other previous speakers said about anti-Semitism or others minority group that are facing challenge here in Richmond. So for the past 3 years of the pandemic, Asian Canadians, especially Chinese Canadians, has been targeted for racism and discriminations. Racism including negative stereotyping and injustice experienced by Asian Canadians based on others' assumptions of their ethnicity and nationality. And it is a great news that the City of Richmond is bringing forward these motions to address racism and discriminations in our communities. Racism in any form is unacceptable and has no place in Canada. It is against the fundamental value of Canadians. It is our responsibility to step up and stand together to fight against racism, including anti-Asian racism. There are many things that we can do, such as promoting racial and cultural understandings. We must also challenge the negative stereotyping and spread the correct information about other cultures and other minority peoples. Our organization will continue to work with other visual minority groups in Canada to continue on this fight. And we look forward to work with the City of Richmond and to bring true harmony to our communities. And let's light the beacon and bring some lights to the community. So thank you very much. Thank you, Alex Lowe. Thank you, Cha, for bringing this up.
All right, thank you very much, sir. The next speaker is, yes, you?
Good evening. My name is Elsar Junaid, resident of Richmond and a Palestinian activist. I'm going to be talking about adopting motion number 21. So before I start, I would like to state that I'm against any type of racism or hate for any community or organization, and I would do anything to help stand against it. However, as an activist for Palestinian human rights and many organizations and individuals committed to both anti-racism and freedom of expression, and the lead drafter of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, Kenneth Stern, express a concern over the definition being weaponized or used unfairly to shut down criticism of the Israeli occupation. According to the definition, a significant amount of what is considered anti-Semitic is simply critical speech directed towards Israeli human rights violations against Palestinians. It also has resulted in suppressing speech and often racist harassment campaigns, particularly anti-Palestinian racism, which Independent Jewish Voices Canada, the Arab Canadian Lawyers Association, the Islamophobia Studies Center and BC Civil Liberties Association and the UN have documented. It is true that several of the examples show clear instances of anti-Semitism. Others, such as calling Israel a racist endeavor or treating Israel with double standards, might be used as a rationalization for killing, suffering, murder, torture, brutalization, and the destruction of homes that the Israeli occupation commits against Palestinians in the name of self-determination for Jews. Indeed, the Israeli occupation is a racist endeavor. Jewish self-determination is possible in many different ways that are anti-Palestinian. Nurai Karta, which are Haredi Jews who oppose Zionism and call for a peaceful dismantling of the occupation, have established many other methods of self-determination other than supporting the apartheid and its inhumane actions. Therefore, the using of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism for vetting, assassination, and training would violate the Charter of Rights and Freedom Section 2B, freedom of expression. This would institute a new double standard protecting Israel from anti-racist criticism while permitting similar criticism about other countries and governments. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Of course.
We've obviously been listening to your point of view, which is important. The second part of this motion 21 is that for clarity, adopting these definitions does not preclude the criticism of specific actions of a particular government or state.
But
Does that give you any comfort?
Yeah, but it's in the examples of the definition, it has, it states that, talking about the state of Israel. So in the
Yes,
example of the definition.
But number 2 says, if we want to criticize Israel or any other country, we can do it.
But the definition, in the definition, the example states, it's a different, it has a different.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
No worries, thank you.
The gentleman at the back. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bilal Khan, born and raised in Richmond. I'm here speaking on the adoption of terminology and definitions in Canada, anti-racism strategy. First thing I want to say is that everybody in this room is completely against racism of all forms and all types, right? I think we can all agree with that. Specifically this motion that has been brought forward is something I don't condone and something that I don't want to support. I've sent in a PDF through the city clerk. I was hoping we could just refer back to that. Sorry, this is my first time public speaking, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the definition of anti-Semitism that you have in this motion, it says that, so you have the definition of anti-Semitism, but on the bottom corner, there's a little footnote that says number 3. So when you scroll down to the definition, it says that the definition it's referring back to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA Alliance. And then it gives you a little website. So when you go to the website, it actually gives you different points of that definition, right? So I think if we're discussing a definition of racism, right? Racism should not include any sort of country or government or specific states. So in this definition that you have here, the first point, it says, accusing Jews as people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. The only part of this first page of the definition, you guys have that PDF, right? Okay. So the only part I don't agree is having the state of Israel on there, right? Because when you go back to if I were to go look up the definition of anti-Semitism in the city of Richmond now, I'm going to go look at this definition, and I'm going to go look at this footnote, right? And the footnote is stating this, but also stating Israel. So even though you made the amendment last week, which I remember you doing, now it serves as a bit of a contradictory statement, right? Where the amendment says, yes, you can contradict a state, but the definition itself, the one that you're referring to, says that I can't criticize the state of Israel. And there's a few other examples of this on this webpage as well, right? Where we see denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. Again, we're trying to remove governments and states out of the definition because they have, like, a government should not be involved in any part of definition of racism, right? If I want to criticize China, I should be able to criticize China the same way, right? If I want to criticize Saudi Arabia, I should be able to criticize them the same way, right? There should be no country or no state that is, exempt from this, from being called racist. So there's a few of those, and then if we can scroll down, I guess it's a piece of paper for you guys, so there's no scrolling down. But if you go to the last page there, it's just a list of other organizations in British Columbia that oppose the adoption of this terminology, of this IHRA definition. And these are made by British Columbians versus this IHRA is adopted by the federal government, which is not something that is representative of our community. Like, our community should be the one determining how we define ourselves, right? The government of Canada, they don't know what goes on in Richmond. As much as they want to claim that they do, they don't know what's going on, right? So yeah, that's all I have for today.
Okay, just before you go, we've got a couple questions for you.
Of course.
Councillor Day. Just hang on. Just hang on a sec. Sorry, hang on a sec.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, add. Oh, try that. There you go.
We are live. Okay, I think you've helped me understand. I've been struggling with this because I don't understand the entire thing, and
Yeah.
what I think I understand.
And that's what I noticed is there's a lot of confusion among this whole like definition and controversy or whatever you want to call it, right?
So what it really comes down to is that what we put in part 2 is diametrically opposed to part 1. Is that what you're saying?
And part 1 is
The actual motion version. So, over here. So 21, yeah. So part 1 is that the city of Richmond adopt the terminology and definitions.
oh yes, yeah, I see that.
Okay, and part 2 is, for clarity, adopting these definitions does not preclude the criticism of specific actions or a particular government or state.
Yeah, exactly. So it shouldn't be like you're the city of Richmond, right? A definition. If you're going to adopt a definition, don't have it contradict itself, right? It's pretty logical.
So then, my next question is, earlier in the agenda, on item number 15, we are adopting by consent the Richmond Community Protocol responding to racism and hate. Do you feel that that covers the concerns that everyone is here to talk about tonight?
Sorry, which portion are you talking about?
So item number 15 on the agenda tonight, it should be in front of you there, number 15.
The protocol? Oh, so do you mind repeating your question real
Yeah,
quick?
so my question is, given that we have this on the consent agenda, which means it's already approved by council and we're going to approve it I would imagine again tonight. Do you feel that that covers the issues that everyone here has been talking about?
I 100% agree that item number 15 covers all the issues that anyone would be concerned with, especially it's also created by the people of Richmond, right? Which is something very important, at least for me anyway, right? You're all Richmond city councilors. You're not, Surrey city councilors or BC councilors or anything. We're talking about for our community, what works best for our community, right? So if the city, if different organizations, right, and it says here, including the RCMP, the Richmond School Board, Richmond Public Library, like, this should be enough for us, right? We don't need we don't need a whole set of definitions, right? When we have a protocol in place, something that's actionable, right?
Okay,
Thank
we're
you.
going to go to Councillor Heed.
Thank you, and for your first time doing a public presentation, you did a very fine job.
Thank you.
So I want to ask a question here, given the fact that we have this definition, the IHRA, and you've pointed us to the footnote. So if I was to criticize the repressive nature of the Israeli government at this particular time on the oppression that's going on with a certain group, would I be accused of being anti-Semitic?
That's where the confusion comes in, and why I'm saying it's contradictory. But right now, according to this IHRA definition, right, not including the amendment that has been put forward, right, yes, I guess you would be considered anti-Semitic, as if you were to criticize Israel.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Galanders.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have to say that when we got the PDF, it didn't say what your stance
Yeah, I
was
know.
on it. So, and then when I saw the things you were highlighting, I actually thought, oh, you support the IRA definition because these, like, accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state or inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, I agree with that statement. And that's not criticizing Israel, is it?
Sorry, repeat that.
Well, that your first, none of these examples that you've given, they mention Israel, but they don't actually, it's not not allowing criticism of Israel.
It does, though.
It's saying you can't
Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, that would be a criticism against Israel. Because you're criticizing their policy, you're criticizing their government policy.
They're saying you can absolutely criticize their policy, but you can't compare it to what the Holocaust was. That's all it's saying, isn't it?
But I think that when free speech is concerned, right, I should be able to compare, what China's doing to the Uyghur Muslims as, a Holocaust as well, right? So, if I personally think that what Israel is doing to, obviously it's not a perfect side-by-side comparison of what the Holocaust is, right? But it's getting there, right?
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Are there any other, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all. Are there any other people who wish to delegate on items on the agenda tonight? So there's one. Is there anybody else? Okay, so Mr. Goldstein, you'll be the last speaker. Last delegation.
Your Worship, fellow councillors, thank you for this opportunity, and people of the public. I've been listening carefully to what speakers have said here today, especially on item number 21 brought forward by Councillor Liu. And there were 2 points there I'd like to clarify how I see these 2 points. One is that the IHRA restricts freedom of speech. Well, every regulation, rule, and law restricts freedom of some sort. That's the whole purpose of the regulation, rule, or law. The question is it a reasonable restriction, in this case on speech? And I think it is. And so, of course, I'm speaking in favor of the motion. And the other one is the racism I'd like to speak a little bit about Zionism. What Zionism has components to it. The core, though, is that the Jewish people are the indigenous people of the land of Israel. And so there is an inherent right. We understand this in Canada very well, because we're right now, as in Canada, we're undergoing a truth and reconciliation process with our own indigenous people here of Canada, or at least the land on which Canada sits. So I would say that to say that Jews would not have a special right to Israel would be, I would call that a racist statement in itself. And in Israel itself, there are 2 million non-Jews who are citizens, full citizens of Israel, living in the same laws. It's a liberal democracy like we have here. And I think we all feel very fortunate and lucky to be living in a liberal democracy. I know I do. And so I would vote to support this motion to help the Jewish people who are living here, anyways, in Richmond. But it's also in support of Israel itself, our good friend and fellow liberal democracy, a bright light in that part of the world. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, may I have a motion to rise and report? So moved. All those in favor, opposed, carried. It brings us to the consent agenda. I'll just read out the highlights. First of all, we have receipt of committee minutes. Then we have applications by the City of Richmond for, let's see now. We've got the 2023 Community Mural Program projects, then the Heritage alteration permits for 6511 Dyke Road, 5180 Westwater Drive. Then we have the 2023 grants for arts and culture, for parks and rec and community events, environmental enhancement, the health, social, and safety grants, and the child care grants. Then we have the Richmond Community Protocol responding to racism and hate. We have land use applications for first reading, which go to public hearing on March 20th. There's 7780, 7800, 7804, 20, and 40 River Road, rezoning from auto-oriented commercial, CA, to high-rise riverfront commercial. Then we have the 2022 annual reports and 2023 work plans for the Child Care Development Advisory Committee, for the Richmond Community Services Advisory Committee, and the Richmond Heritage Commission. May I have a motion to adopt those by general consent? So moved. Moved and seconded. We'll go to Councillor McNulty.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting all those on the agenda, and I just want to talk about a couple of things, make a few brief comments, because obviously it'll be a long night tonight, and I'll keep my comments brief on it, but I'm going to go from, everything here is important, but I'm going to go from the least important to the most important. The community mural programs, I want to thank staff for an outstanding project and report on it. I'm a big fan of the murals and beautification of our city. I'm hoping that the cities or the projects that weren't selected will be considered in the next round down the road. I think it's important because I think all the sites that were identified on that were extremely important on it, and I think it will only better the city. On the two heritage alteration permits, I think we've got to continue to support that, Your Worship. We want these places to be destination. When I wrote the first report on the Britannia shipyards back in 1989 with Bob Ransford and Harold Steves, we had a vision for the Britannia shipyards, and that report still exists today because we're actually doing it 30 years later. But we've got to invest in, if we want heritage, it does cost, and in order for us to handle it, we've got to invest back in it, and I think these are steps in the right direction. And I want to give a shout out to staff on the grants. As I mentioned, the committee, we're giving out tonight $997,521, short of just a few pennies short of $1 million to a community that needs it and organizations that need it, and I'm very happy that we can do that. And whether it be community services, the environment, childcare, whatever. Staff, I thought, did an extremely great job as usual, but even better because these are tough times. In one case, for example, 9 groups got 100%, and we know the kind of work that they're doing. They need that. Somebody said, we don't want to give more than that, but they put in what they thought they also would get. There's a mechanism to writing grants, and I'd love to give each one of these a little bit more. I also just thank you to the Heritage Commission and the Services Advisory Commission and also the Child Care. I think it's important. I did want to make a comment, Your Worship, on the Richmond Community Protocol. On it, obviously, that'll be the focus tonight. You know, I hope we never have to use the document, but we have it. It's not a political issue, but a human issue, and I thank those for bringing it forward. It's a template for what we go into. It says it's a tool to guide. Well, we've got the tools. Now we've got to implement it and put it out there. I think it's extremely important. A guide for community organizations, stakeholders, and public to unified responses for incidents of racism and hate. Unfortunately, we need this document. As I said earlier, I wish we never had to use it, but we need it. We've got hate out in the community, and we need something. This is our community. You know, we can say what the feds are doing, whatever, but when we adopt something, we adopt it for Richmond, and we adopt it for ourselves. To me, this is the most important document, one of the 2 most important documents on the agenda tonight. And I'll speak more when the other one comes up, Your Worship, under it. We're making it a Richmond brand, but also we're taking something that has been put out in front of us, and it's important that we take it and put it to use as we need it. We need to do something. It's our community. It fits with the cultural harmony policy, which Council has already adopted, and I think it's something we've gone. So we need to support victims. We heard earlier some of the delegations, etc. I think we've got to deal with what we have here, and I'm going to be definitely supporting it, obviously endorsing it, making it, as I asked at committee, part and parcel, Your Worship, added to the community harmony so that both of the documents are together in one binder, so then when we hold it up, we've got it all in our hand. And hopefully, refer to the other, which I'll speak later, I hope to speak later, Your Worship, that would be added to it, and we would say, this is made in Richmond, this is what we want, this is how we live, and we hopefully will be a shining example to everybody else. No document is perfect. No document is to satisfy everything. Unfortunately, the state of the world is such that we would be totally irresponsible to not take something forward and put it forward when it's sitting right in our hand to do it. But more importantly, we know that this is important. I'm the son of a bohunk, a DP. My folks came from White Russia and Poland, and knowing what it was like, and raised as a child, my mother spoke Ukrainian, never taught us children how to speak it because she was ashamed of it and didn't want to get it out. So she spoke English all the time, a heritage that I have missed wholly on my side. And I make that a declaration. I have no problem with that. So I know what it can be like, not to the extent that some folks have, but as far as I'm concerned, as a council sitting here, I'm going to make sure that I put my vote in the right place. And we can always add, we can always change. Nothing is totally etched in stone. As things get better, we can get better, and we can add to it. And I'll mention that we can add to our own, by adopting it, we make it Richmond. We can further build on this if we have to, and we continue to make it our own. So, Your Worship, I'll support everything that's on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll speak to a few items. I am in support of The full consent agenda tonight, so I'll just kind of follow along where Councillor McNulty left off. So the past council received the protocol document in April of last year when it was, as part of an event, it was launched, and as was mentioned, it is a guide. It's there to support victims. It's also kind of a fluid document where things can be modified going forward to improve its worth, its use. Just to highlight in there, there are pages of definitions under the Appendix 1, so clearly there's room in that document. Then the next one I'd like to speak to is some of the grants. So I appreciate staff's work to give a nice comprehensive reach to all the organizations who asked for funding, and to be able to meet that demand. They were able to reduce the maximum that was requested to provide the greatest amount of benefit to all of Richmond, because there's more groups doing their own specialized way of connecting the community, providing cultural services, park enhancement, environmental enhancement, and the like. I also really appreciated Council's work together to find 3 organizations to use the balance of funds for the Health and Social and Safety grant, so that was well done in a consensus manner. I also acknowledged support from those around the table for more funding, perhaps a larger budget for the environmental enhancement grants, which is the newest of the 5, and it is definitely picking up steam as people are learning its worth, and it's actually unique in the way that it provides individuals the opportunity to get grant funding. The community mural program, I think, still has a lot of gray concrete surfaces to cover, and some great selections have been made in the project update before us tonight. The last item I'd like to speak to is item number 16, and I do have a question to staff. I'm not on the planning committee, so I didn't ask then, but I think this is a good time to ask it, because I think we can get a lot out of this project, or this site. Sorry, let me just read the project for us. So it's the rezoning of it's the high-rise riverfront commercial development at Aberdeen Village. So the couple points I have is, in the package we've received, I just want to know if staff can speak to when some of this can be further modified or confirmed, because there's still a lot of options in here, or at least some things that I think are workable. The first one of those relates to the adaptive public realm concept, so how to use the west side of this building, where it will be a super dike, and we've been presented in the package that there's options A and B. There's a page 649 is where these images start. It talks about a two-way traffic for what is the current River Road, or potential one-way traffic. And then options C and D on page 651, 652 show that no auto uses, so a full bike path, seasonal outdoor patio, recreational space. At what stage will staff be able to work with this developer to confirm which of those options?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, the intent of the design that's shown in the package is to illustrate that there is one design for the infrastructure that would go in, and that it can be adapted as the city wishes over time. So the city center area plan anticipates that traffic will be necessary in that area in the future, because it will have commercial uses both on the water and fronting on the upland. But over time, the city may find that as the popularity of the waterfront increases, that we want to control access by vehicles during certain times of the week or certain times of the year. And so the intent is that those concepts are 4 of perhaps a half a dozen concepts that could be created based on over time as the city determines it wants to use that piece of infrastructure that will be constructed.
Thank you. The follow-up, of 2 follow-ups, and then I think I'll be done. So to hear it's kind of city direction, kind of what we're hoping is the ultimate use of that space. I also see that in line with the next page, which is on page 653. It's the environmental assessment, environmental sensitive area replacement areas. So I just see if we were able to narrow down which option, ideally an option without the need for auto infrastructure and all that asphalt, that perhaps the ESA compensation doesn't have to all be removed from where the current environmental sensitive area is zoned. Right now, as is shown on this page, it would all move basically outside that zone except for a couple little pockets of structures. But if we're able to narrow down the use on that side of the building, could we not then work to get more of the green, the off structure along that area so that the environmental sensitive features are in the space where they'll get used, not trapped behind concrete structures?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, in terms of the environmentally sensitive area.
Can you pull in the mic, please?
Your worship to Councillor Wolf, in terms of the environmental sensitive area compensation strategy, that will be further detailed through the development permit, which would be forthcoming should the rezoning proceed. Staff will work to revise this concept through the development permit. As indicated by Ms. Carter-Huffman, in terms of the off-site infrastructure design, that is relatively fixed in terms of being able to allow for the adaptive use of that area, but we will look to maximize planting within the existing environmentally sensitive area. I would also point out that as part of the dike raising, there will be environmental compensation along the foreshore.
That's terrific. Thanks for that. And the final follow-up question then, through your worship, is in relation to the step code and them reaching the energy step code level 2. We're getting pretty far along here in our community energy and emissions plan. We've got a big OCP amendment project work coming up. Could we foresee that this could actually get to a higher step code and do better for the climate and the emissions plan?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, the Energy Step Code 2 is the minimum requirements that will be achieved. There will be a low carbon energy system provided for heating and cooling. The intention is the site will connect to the city's district energy utility should it be operational, in which case the on-site district energy would only be for cooling. Having said that, through the development permit, we will work with the applicant to improve the sustainability package to the greatest extent possible.
Great, much appreciated. With that, I'll support all the items on the consent agenda. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, I too will be supporting everything on the consent agenda. Just a couple quick comments and maybe one question. First, the mural program, much has been said, but I think it's one of the most popular programs that we have in the city. In particular, the new mural for Stevenson Pool and South Arm Pool are close to me since our kids were in swim club and everything. Those are going to be fantastic, especially if they follow the theme of the parks and the users that use those pools. Just recently, some of us were at the mural unveiling at Garden City School, and if you haven't seen that, check it out. It was beautiful as well. So it definitely helps to activate the city and enhance the livability of the city. London Forum, the next one, number 8, I'm the liaison to that society, and I just want to mention that the branding exercise that staff took the board through and the community members through was very well attended. These changes, the pond, the pathway, the opening up of that side of London Farm is very well supported by the society and the public. There's a lot of enthusiasm for that, and I think everybody is very happy with the assistance and guidance and help that the city and staff in particular have provided to that society and board, and that's going to continue to be an even more fantastic site. Next is number 9, the Britannia site. That is a complete jewel for Richmond, but also for British Columbia. There's nothing quite like it. I think there's 14 heritage buildings there, and so the investment we're making there in siding and roofs and water mitigation under some of the buildings is a very good investment. Heritage sites like this are investment heavy. You do have to pay money to keep them up, but that is a big draw for many people coming from out of town as well, as people that live in Richmond. So I'm very happy with that one and glad to see heritage being maintained in our city. Next would be number 10, just the arts and culture grants. And just one question for staff on this one too. I found the charts, the tables 1 and 2 in that report very helpful, but I did notice that the operating grants, there's no new operating grants for the last few years and a few new project grants. And so to me, you have to have a project before you can qualify for the operating grant, but I'm just wondering about the philosophy or the rationale or the thought that goes into it. Because operating-wise, I would think that we get to a point where perhaps people wouldn't need the operating grant because they're relatively small and rely more on the project grant. So what's the philosophy or the thought behind that?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs. In best practices for arts and culture grants, we try to maintain a balance between operating and project grants. Project grants, indeed, as you said, afford the opportunity for innovation, for smaller fledgling groups who want to get into the game to have a leg up, to be able to put up their projects, who might not have the infrastructure to support that project. Operating grants are meant to sustain the foundations of larger organizations that have been around for a long time and are repeating programs that are indeed desired by the community, but might not have that shiny new perspective that you might find in innovation. Though those groups also do provide opportunities for new innovation for individuals and groups who might not want to start an organization or might not want to get together a project themselves, but rely on the umbrella organization to provide those activities for them.
Okay, all right, that sounds sensible and reasonable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a couple more comments, Your Worship. One is the community protocol. I agree with many of the comments made already about it. The basic thing about the protocol is that on the one hand, it's a little bit theoretical. It does supply definitions itself and that kind of thing, but it also is a very practical kind of handbook or guide for people that may be new to the community, but also people that have lived here a long time and maybe haven't dealt with a situation that they find themselves in. So it's very practical as well, and I think it helps to demonstrate Richmond's commitment to those causes. So I fully support that. And the last comment will just be about the River Road project from Urban Solutions. A couple comments have already been made about it, but I'll just limit it to this. There's some innovative things included in the project, and one of the things I did like, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the flexible road, as was mentioned, and also the environmentally sensitive area, because there's a 3-to-1 compensation for that, and I understand that depending on where it goes, it could be improved on. But I think the proposal itself is very creative. There's a lot of benefit to the city through the public art contribution of about $114,000, and also the community amendment voluntary contribution of $2.9 million, which will go a long way in the city. So it looks like a very interesting development. So that's it for me, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Rao?
Yeah, Your
What? You just turned yourself off.
Only press it once.
I'm going to try this again. Just a minute, see if I can do it this way. Okay.
Good, thank you. Yeah, Your Worship, I'm going to support everything on the consent agenda, but I want to comment on a few items. The first one is number 7, 2023 Community Mural Program projects. And as being mentioned in the report, in 2018, City Council endorsed the Public Art Community Mural Program. And it's a very ambitious program, and we've seen results in the last few years, despite the pandemic and other things. And we've seen a number of murals being added to the assets in the community. And especially the most recent one is the one that we just launched a few days ago at Garden City Elementary School. And to me, each piece of the mural is not just a piece of public art. It tells the Richmond stories. And it shows the different faces of Richmond as a community. And I think this is very important for Richmond, which is an immigrant community. So when people coming to our city from different parts of the world, and when they see these stories being told in the form of a mural, I think they get more, they get to know the city, and also they feel the sense of belonging as a member of our community. And related to that, I would like to mention on number 10, 11, and 12, the different grants. I think we cannot achieve our goals without supporting our community partners to achieve their goals. And we cannot help them by not giving them the grants. So I think these grants are going to help these organizations to achieve their goals, and they can do it more because of the support that is given by the city. And I always see that this is not that we are supporting or subsidizing these organizations. On the contrary, it's these organizations helping us and supporting us and subsidizing us by using their resources to help the city to achieve its goals. So I think it's good that we can give out those grants, particularly some of the grants such as number 11, which is to help the neighborhood to come together to organize events so that they can build up a spirit of a community. And finally, I want to comment on the protocol. I'm pleased that we have come this far to finally adopting this protocol. It's been in the making for a few years by a number of organizations, as being mentioned. The goal of the city is to build a harmonious community for all. But we also have to admit that there are occasions when things happen which is very ugly. And I think we need to have a roadmap, a guide for us to work together when things like this happen. So this protocol is important in the sense that it's the result of the collaboration of many cities, stakeholders, organizations, and also many people who are involved. This protocol is also being seen as a template that could be used in other cities. So by adopting this protocol, I think for everybody in the city right now, we have one common document that we can refer to when things happen, and we know who should do what and when in order to address those instances. The city has invested in it by having members on the committee, by using staff time to help them to format, to work on the documents. So we have invested in it. So it's better for us just to adopt it and use it as a common guide for all. So with that, Your Worship, I'm happy to support everything on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Heed.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a general question for staff with respect to this.
Sorry, just a minute.
Just a general question to staff with respect to the grants on this. We're handing out $1 million, and certainly it's needed for these specific organizations. My question to staff is, what's our accountability process we have in place to ensure that these organizations that we're granting money to are actually spending money in the fashion that they've come forward with requesting the grant?
Who can help? Ms. Lusk?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Heed. In a very general sense, we receive reports back from each of these organizations. We have several different programs, so the reporting requirements are slightly different depending on which grant program it might be. But we do receive reports back from each of the organizations, and in particular, prior to a following year grant, which most organizations will be applying for, we go through and scrutinize their previous year's activities.
Just a follow-up question with respect to that is, do we find every compliance about 100%? What's the percentage of compliance?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, I don't know the exact number. Certainly there are times where grants have not been awarded fully or grant funds have been returned, but I don't have the specifics at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. Sorry about that. So I'll be supporting everything on the consent agenda. Number 7 is the mural program. We're going to get 5 new murals, and I think that's going to go a long ways to making the community feel more like a community. Number 8 is the improvements to the London Farm. You know, this is a major heritage site, and the exciting new improvements will allow for like a bridge over the water and more open spaces and a place for people to sit down. And I hope that lots of people will start going there because it's a wonderful place to enjoy the history of Richmond and how we all got started so many years ago. Those of us who are newcomers. Number 13 is the Health Social Services Grant. This is a lot of money that we're handing out, and we're giving it to the most completely deserving organizations. For example, $226,000 would go to the Richmond Addiction Services Society. The work that they do there is invaluable to the community. Last year, we gave $22,000 to St. Albans Parish, but this year we're increasing that to $35,000 because that will provide better services for the homeless, new immigrants. And if you're interested in the work they do, it's on page 455. And they actually have volunteers going out at night to places where people are camping out, homeless people, and they have sandwiches and drinks that they hand out from the back seat of their car. These volunteers are absolutely the most dedicated, fearless people I've ever met. And I'm really pleased to be supporting St. Albans in their very, very important work. Number 13 is, oh, sorry, just go back to the dike. Number 8 is the, sorry, got a bit of a cold here. Child care grants, again, the work that the child care community does, child care advisory committee does is absolutely invaluable. And we have so many more daycare spaces per capita than other communities. And part of that is the work that this committee does. And they're really, I mean, we have a number of daycares now that have $10 a day daycare. That's a game changer for families. And so I'm super happy to be supporting those grants. Number 15 is the protocol, which I thank Councillor Al for bringing forward. An excellent document, as Councillor Wolf pointed out. And I think we are such an inclusive community, and of all the things in Richmond I'm proud of, I think the Highway to Heaven is one of the ones I'm most proud of. And the way that all of the synagogues, temples, mosques, and all work together, and they actually share their parking lots, and they have their own society, and they are doing amazing work together. So I really feel that this will take us to the next level in creating a more harmonious community. I did have a question to staff about we made a motion a while back, Councillor Wolf made, about the steps that we're going to take to make some of the needs of the truth and reconciliation issue set down by the federal government. And I'm wondering if this protocol will satisfy some of the recommendations in the truth and reconciliation report. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
Through your worship to Councillor Day. So the Truth and Reconciliation referral will be looking at the questions that were brought forward through the analysis of the referral.
And when do we expect that referral to come back, just out of curiosity?
Through your worship to Councillor Day. That referral is going to be coming back to Council in the first part of Q2.
Okay, perfect. Now, do you think that some of the steps taken in this protocol responding to racism and hate will accommodate some of those requirements in the Truth and Reconciliation?
If you can answer that now.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, that is still being analyzed right now, and so once we bring back our full analysis, we'll be in a better position to answer that question.
Perfect. Well, I think what I love best about the protocol is it's a made in Richmond solution to issues that we have right here, and that makes it so successful. Item number 16 is the development on River Road. This is going to be a high-rise riverfront commercial property, and for that stretch of 7400 River Road, it's going to move River Road from the dike around this development and further away from the river. Well, why would we do that? Because we want to have better access to the riverfront. And this will allow a significant building to be built where formerly the dike and the road is. And it will be a super dike, which means instead of just being a dike that's maybe 30 feet wide, this will be the entire development. And that's the wave of the future. What's also exciting about this development is that it will allow public access to an area that they really wouldn't have access to today. And if you go to page 651 of our report, there's a picture of pedestrians and cyclists enjoying, a sunset. They'll be able to do that on this property. On page 652, there's another picture of people just having a bite to eat and children playing. And again, that will now be possible. My only concern is that, as we heard earlier, asked by councillors, that options C and D would create a pedestrian, cyclist, public welcome only uses, whereas A, B, and C allow for cars. I think that's going in the wrong direction. So as this moves forward, I will be championing the public use of this land, because I don't think we need to have a road going around this development and have cars on top of the super dike. So I'd like to see this be something that all of the public can enjoy. And number 9 is the changes to heritage Britannia shipyards. This is really exciting because it's going to improve a number of buildings on the property, which allow for better public engagement. And that's it for me. Thank you very much, Mayor Brody.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I too will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda. As Councillor Day and a few others mentioned, we're doing some work on London Farm and Britannia shipyards to further the activation at those places. And what is really exciting on this particular agenda is 7780 River Road and the number of addresses there. It's really going to activate the water. There's going to be offices, a hotel, and a restaurant. It's right across the street from Aberdeen Centre and the Aberdeen Canada Line station. And so that creates good opportunities. So imagine you're working in one of those offices, you can go downstairs and eat, because we all know we have some places in Richmond where we've got business centers and business industrial areas that there aren't a lot of food options, or you always have to get in a car to do something else. So I think this is great. And right next door to it is our old stable that is housing the Rod and Gun Club. And it's located on a site that has immense heritage value for Richmond. This is where the first City Hall of Richmond was located, and I think we have a really cool opportunity as we continue building and creating that waterfront park that will be going along the whole waterfront all the way down towards the Oval, that this is sort of one of the ends of it, and everything will be filling in the meantime. And so we'll be able to add heritage sites that then have restaurant, hotel, everything else in conjunction with the heritage site. While our Britannia is amazing, and London Farm is amazing, it's not close to anything. So if you're staying somewhere, you have to, go see it versus just, you're already there, it's easy to see, it's easy to experience, and it's easy to take in. So I think this really has a lot of value, and I'm excited to see this come forward. Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to call the question on the motion. Just hang on a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to the 2 items which have been taken off the consent agenda. I'll go to Councillor Liu for the declaration of a conflict. Want to press your button? Press your button. Oh, here you go. Sometimes it has a mind of its own. Okay, Councillor Liu.
Well, as long as it's got a mind. I have to declare a conflict. I'm on the board of directors for Kids Sport Richmond, the organization that supports kids who otherwise couldn't afford to do sports in Richmond, and so I'll recuse myself.
Okay, no, thanks. There has been a suggested slight change. Hopefully, Council is going to find it appropriate. The idea of this motion is that the Kidsport money, $20,000 would be granted to Kidsport and $5,000 held back. The suggestion is that the last sentence, or last line, Richmond Sports Council and can would be changed to may, be given to Kidsport or used for any youth-oriented recreational endeavor. All right, so I'll make the motion that the grant to Kidsport be awarded in the amount of $20,000. Secondly, the $5,000 be held back and that staff be directed in consultation with the president of the Richmond Sports Council to allocate and administer grants for sports groups and recognized by Kidsport, and that any remaining balance at the end of the year would be again adjudicated by staff in conjunction with the president of Richmond Sports Council and may be given to Kidsport or used for any youth-oriented recreational endeavor, and I would so move.
Second.
So the idea is to take the $25,000, don't just give it to Kidsport, because Kidsport does wonderful work where they take applications and give money to kids where their families don't have money, enough money to have them participate in various sports, so they can get reasonably small but meaningful grants. We would hold back $5,000 because Kidsport doesn't deal with every sport in the entire province. So we'll hold back $5,000. Application can be made where Kidsport doesn't apply. And if there's an amount left at the end of the year, our staff will speak to the president of the Sports Council, and that money, whatever remains, can be used it can be given to Kidsport, but it could also be used for any other youth-oriented recreational endeavor. So I think it's eminently worth supporting. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just to pass on a further item, just for council's understanding. Kidsport can only give money because they are not a Richmond-based thing. They're looked after by Sport BC, to those groups that have what we call a provincial sport governing body. And many of the martial arts don't have sport governing bodies. Many of the, everything from cheerleading to ultimate to whatever. And staff are going to prepare a list of sports who can apply for this, which will be different than the baseball team down at Sport BC or the hockey team or the track and field team or the basketball team. So this actually allows us to be more inclusive. So thank you, Your Worship.
All right, Councillor Day.
Just had a quick question. So the $20,000 that we are giving to Kidsport, I didn't realize that they were under Sport BC. Will we make sure that that $20,000 is going to Richmond youth?
It is.
That's my understanding. Who can answer, talk about that?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, yes, the purpose of the funding to Kidsport is for Richmond youth that are a part of the BC sports system.
Perfect, that's all I wanted to hear. Thank you very much.
Okey-doke. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. That brings us to the item that we've heard a lot of delegations on, the adoption of the terminology and definitions in Canada's anti-racism strategy. And the recommendation of the General Purposes Committee was as follows, that the City of Richmond adopt the terminology and definitions in pages 21 to 24 of Canada's anti-racism strategy 2019 to 2022 in its entirety. And secondly, that for the clarity, adopting these definitions does not preclude the criticism of specific actions of a particular government or state, and I would so move.
Second.
So that's moved and second. Maybe I could turn to Councillor Au. I believe you brought, no, it was Councillor Liu who brought forward, so why don't I turn this over to you to introduce it.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks to all the speakers that came out tonight. I think as we saw through the pandemic that we saw a rise in hate crimes and incidents here in Richmond. We heard loud and clear that our constituents want us to do something to specifically combat hate and racism. We heard it a lot from our Asian community. We also heard it from the Jewish community. We did hear it from other people as well, that what are you doing about it? We expect you to do something. One of the reasons I wanted a definition was because we had a president down south talking about the China virus. And I don't want my children to be abused because of their Chinese heritage or called to task because of actions by the Chinese government. When I originally saw the IRA definition, it spoke to me on that level, because I know that as a Chinese person, we're often called on and complained about because of things that are going on somewhere else. When that president was talking about the China virus, I felt fearful, and I certainly didn't feel the level of fear that maybe some other people fear for their backgrounds. I liked the piece that the IRA definition had was the idea of separating a person from the government of the country of their ancestry. What I like about Canada's definitions are that it's more all-encompassing. It includes far more groups. It's more inclusive. It's more, it includes all of us instead of just one particular group. What I'd originally been thinking is we'd take the one and then start building it off. There already existed the bigger framework for everybody to be included, and that's what I thought was good. And so we are not the actions of the government. We're not the actions of the terrorist organization that calls home to the country of our heritage. We are not that. We are people here in Richmond. We want a safe place to live. By defining and diagnosing, then we can address it through the protocols that we already passed. There are rules around hate speech, and they do inherently curtail freedom of speech. And I think we only need to look at the US. Where in the US, they're so afraid of going against their Second Amendment right to bear arms that every day 316 people are shot in the US and 106 die. So keeping our community safe, our kids, our families safe here in Richmond, we're adopting a definition. We are adopting protocols. We're defining what behavior we want people to obey. And so that's what this is, and I hope everyone can support it. And thanks again to everyone who came out and spoke.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Again, as I said earlier, I'm going to support this. We're adopting definitions and terminology and what have you, and Councillor Liu enunciated well. This is the first step that we've taken to give a message to the whole community that we will not tolerate hate or racism, prejudice, or any hostility. And I think this is, along with the other document we passed earlier, Your Worship, I think it's important to put that down. And if the document helps in any way to combat hatred, it's worth it. We need to do it. I said it, worth it. We must do it. I'd like to see it more inclusive, if you wish, and add. And I think it's a document, even though it came from the Canada's, the federal government, we can always add to it and make it Richmond continue. To me, this is Richmond's document as well. And this is how we live in our community. And I think we need to represent everybody. We see hatred this very day. And I won't say where, all you got to do is start thinking about it. For those of us that understand it. It's our issue. We have to deal with it. I think this is a step in the right direction. And with the other documents, putting them both, all three together, hopefully we will continue to try to focus and get those that are perpetrators to focus on a harmonious community and separate church and state, so to speak, and state and city away, because this is how we live. And I'm very, very supportive of it. So,
all right, Councillor Heed.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to draw the attention. We've got the recommendation in front of us. You've got a part 1 and you've got a part 2. The end of part 1, you say in its entirety. Then we contradict that by going to part 2. But this is the thing you say, that for clarity, adopting their definition does not preclude the criticism of specific actions or of a particular government or state. Well, you've just said above that we're taking that in its entirety.
All right.
That's a comment where it's contradicting the first one. 2 is contradicting 1. It certainly is, because you're saying it's in the entirety, and then you're trying to re-clarify it a little further in number 2. My comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple quick comments. And first, I want to thank all the delegates who came out and spoke, whether it was your first time or whether it was your 100th time. It's a serious topic. It's an emotional topic, and it brings out a lot of feelings among people for various reasons, and that's all just fine. So thank you for being here. Canada's anti-racism terminology and definitions, when I first read it, yeah, I had some concerns and questions as well, and I've had many conversations with people, some present here today and some not present here today. So there's been a lot of clarification on my part as well. The concerns expressed by everybody, I think, are fair and legitimate, and I think that it's important that we take all of those into consideration, and we have. One of the observations I've had in this discussion is that no other real definitions contained in Canada's strategy and definitions and have been really taken into any kind of concern or criticism other than the one about anti-Semitism, at least from what I've heard. And so I think it's real and it's fair to acknowledge that anti-Semitism, my opinion, is a real thing, as are many other prejudices and racism in Canada and elsewhere in the world, in all countries. But the link between anti-Semitism and Israel is perhaps more inextricably linked than maybe other countries and other prejudices and forms of racism that we've seen. And the two of them keep coming up. And when I read the documents attached, I too was concerned about the mention of Israel in it, but I satisfied myself in reading it, also in combination with our own laws, our own Charter of Rights, our own other statutes that we have, common law, which is a big thing in the British system of law, which ours is based on largely, that those protections of free speech are there. And that, as somebody described it to me, this is not a slippery slope in preventing anybody from criticizing a state, whether it's Israel or whether it's China or whether it's another country. That is not there. That's governed by law that's well established and many court precedents that are also on record. So I satisfied myself that that wasn't a reason to vote against it, although it is a concern for some people, and I get that. Overall, when I asked myself what we should do with this, it came down to a more basic kind of question, and that is, does this move us forward in conjunction with other documents and like the protocol we already talked about? And in my opinion, although not perfect and not completely inclusive, it is something that moves us forward incrementally. And I think, to paraphrase another document, does it help us move forward towards a more perfect union? Will we get to be perfect? No. But does it move us forward in a positive direction? And I think, despite the concerns that I've heard from people, I think that it does move us forward. And I think that that's really what we should be asking ourselves, is how do we move forward as a society, making things better and more equal for everybody? And I think that this does help us move forward to that. So it's important that when we do things, and nobody has a crystal ball, but it's important that we don't do harm. You don't want to, it's like the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. And so I think as long as we give it our best attention and a sincere evaluation, and we believe ourselves that we're not doing harm, I think that it does help us move forward incrementally and towards a more just, harmonious society for all people. And so I will be supporting it, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Arriving here today, it's been a bit of a mad rush, I'd say, since we had our General Purposes Committee meeting. Some around the table asked for this item to be tabled for more time to individually do our due diligence research. And so, again, I feel differently than Councillor Hobbs just described. I actually feel this has put a wedge into the community. In this short time since General Purposes, and looking at the data, tallying up all the correspondence and the individuals I spoke to, 27 opposed and 9 in support. It's 3-1. And I know that's not all that I base this on. But clearly what I see this, it's a great recommendation, like put definitions forward and have them debated and maybe put them into policy. we just approved the protocol. In there is pages on definitions. In there, it doesn't include any specific cultural racism, but it has the general definition. What we're being asked to accept right now are 4 specific cultures being identified, and some have been left out. I don't know if I would even say that these 4 are the largest 4, or the ones that need to be addressed. I think Indigenous racism not being in this is a concern. I think we've heard from other groups that definitely in today's world are oppressed, experience racism in those places of the world, but as well as their representatives living here in Richmond. It doesn't feel good to not support what many have eloquently said is a step in the right direction for them. It just also doesn't feel right to bring this in and create this kind of gap. I think what the best course of action would have been was to direct the creators of this document, the Richmond Multicultural Community Services, for their consideration of these definitions to embed in the next rendition version of this document. Again, with the Truth and Reconciliation work still being done, coming back to us in April, I think there was valid reason to have this tabled, and also brought up today on around the table here around the contradictory of our 2 parts. The majority of the examples in the definition mention the state of Israel or a particular government, 7 of the 11 examples. So it's like to pass this, and then the person who picks it up and says, okay, Richmond has adopted this policy, they go to the policy, they read the policy, or the definition. They don't, I'm not for sure, but I think the majority of people would not take into account that second component and then have to apply that lens when they look at the articles of the definition. Maybe they would, and maybe if I had more time, I'd feel more confident that that would be the case, but today I don't. Yeah, I apologize, but the shortness of time given to us doesn't satisfy the decision that's being asked to be made by Richmond City Council.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with everything that everybody has said. I don't think this is easy, and there's things that I don't like about it. I want to thank everybody for coming out to speak, and I just want you to know that we're listening intently. I also, to say that it's a step forward, but then to hear that it's that it causes controversy, that I agree with Councillor Wolf that unfortunately it does put a bit of a wedge, and I hope that through our comments and through the work of our community, we can show and prove that controversy to not be true, because on what Councillor Heed said, and regarding the supposed conflict, in item 1 in the definition of IRA, it says right in item 1, however, criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. That is in the definition. And then our clarity, we're sort of we're reiterating that to let people know that that they can, absolutely. All the examples that I've read shows, I feel convinced that there could absolutely be a pro-Palestinian movement that condemns some actions of Israel. There's a certain language that could be used that could be hurtful towards Jews by saying those Jews in Israel are doing that, or you could do it in an anti-Semitic way. The protest, which is what this is pointing out, it's not saying that you can't criticize the country. So I've done my research on that, and I feel that it is safe, but I also absolutely hear that in other areas of the world, that this has been misinterpreted and possibly used as a weapon against Palestinian voices. But they were misinterpreting it from what I've seen. So I can't very well, Councillor Lewis brought this forward, saying, and she's a racialized Canadian, and her children are as well, and I'm white, and I'm not Jewish, and the Jewish community has said how important it is that these definitions are out there, that anti-Semitic acts are increasing in our community. So I think we can bridge this, any divide, by adopting these nationally accepted definitions, because that is the definition. We can't redefine what anti-Semitism is, and these are the definitions that we have to work with. And then if there is any issue with free speech and a Palestinian protest or anything, please come and talk to me and point it out to us, and we'll make changes, because as far as I can see, I don't think that's an issue. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much. Well, the important issues always take lots of time, and that's why they require lots of conversation. I voted to bring this here tonight because I wanted to hear from the public, and I appreciate everyone who's come out and all of the letters that, as Councillor Wolf pointed out, of arguing both sides of this. And what I find interesting is when Councillor Liu first brought this forward and then tabled it and then brought it back a second time, I thought, well, this makes sense. Well, it made sense to me, who was ignorant of all of the details of the conflicts in another part of the world, far, far away from here. And apparently that is affecting the quality of life, people right here in Richmond. So I don't profess to be an expert on anything. But what I'm concerned with is when this document has so much opposition from the New Israel Fund of Canada, the Jewish Faculty Network, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, the Canadian Labour Congress, the BC Civil Liberties Association, the Association of University Teachers, the University of Toronto, 40 faculty associations, and the Jewish Voices of Canada, and even Holocaust scholars. That concerns me. Like, clearly, I don't know as much as the scholars know, but if they're against it, then why are they against it? I wish this had been tabled. I supported the motion to table it at General Purposes Committee meeting because I didn't feel we had enough information to deal with this. So, and I'm still at odds with what does this actually mean? And learning that, and as Councillor Heat pointed out correctly, Part 1 and Part 2 contradict each other. So having said that, what can we learn from the Highway to Heaven? What can we learn from, the synagogues, Tibetan temples, and Buddhist temples, and mosques, and Christian churches that have all learned to work together and form their own society? What can we learn from them? How can we take those lessons and apply it to everyday life? So when we brought this forward, we got a lot of response, which was great. Now, today we just finished passing Councillor Au's motion, the protocol responding to racism and hate. And I'm really glad we did that because that speaks to Richmond. It's a made in Richmond solution. This issue is so confusing, and the fact that even the federal government is reviewing it concerns me greatly. So the question we have is, does it cover everybody? Well, no. It doesn't even cover the Indigenous people, the Truth and Reconciliation items. And I feel that if we adopt this tonight, it's premature. Because in a very short period of time, in Q2, we're going to get back from staff their recommendations on how we can respond to the requirements in the Truth and Reconciliation report. So our reach in council is approving a building on River Road. It's making sure we have enough parkland, making sure our roads are drivable, and making sure our hospitals have enough room for the people who need those things. Is our job as a Richmond City Councillor to override all of these groups that I just mentioned and go with something that has been brought down by the federal government? I don't think it is. I think if we got our oath of office right now out and read it, it would clearly say that our responsibility is to the issues in Richmond. So I think this is, to be honest, way above our pay grade. And the fact that number one and number two contradict each other makes it a real big problem for me. So I can't support this today because I feel that this is way bigger than us 9 people. It involves thousands of people. And I think maybe the best thing to do is to stick with that protocol that we just approved tonight. And then when the federal and provincial and all these organizations get it together and can come up with something that everyone agrees on, then we should adopt it. So I won't be supporting it. I wish we had tabled this to begin with. And I thank you very much for your time.
Councillor Rao.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we need definitions in social policy, just like, we need definitions for science. Because without definitions, we are beating around the bush without knowing what we are doing. So I think we need definitions to fight against racism. And by the merit of adopting these definitions, is that, they have already been approved by the federal government, and it's been used by federal government for their policy, and we do not have to reinvent the wheels. Now, I understand and acknowledge that these definitions or the document itself is not perfect, and it's not comprehensive at all. But to say that, because it's not comprehensive enough or, they are not perfect, I think we are also saying that we are just hoping for the impossible. How could we come up with a definition or definitions that would be comprehensive enough? Because there are always some groups being left out or some new definitions required. And I think what we should do is that we adopt this set of definitions. And when things do arise or new definitions required, we can go on with that. And now I don't see part 1 and part 2 being contradictory. I move part 2 because I heard from the community about the concerns, saying that, adopting these definitions would it limit people's right to criticize the actions of certain government. And part 2 actually clarifies the stand of the Richmond City Council, and also it better clarify what we meant by adopting the first part of those definitions. I agree with many of the speakers that there are works to be done, and actually, perhaps in the next round of revising the protocol, there may be discussion about definitions, and that could be another opportunity for us to consider to include or revise, other definitions. So I think there are ample opportunities in the future for us to make this definition better, or to include newer definitions. But I think there's no reason for us to just keep waiting without knowing what we're waiting for and for how long. So with that, I support the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Liu.
Thank you. I'll wrap up.
Well, all right, let me speak then. I just want to say that I agree with the comments of Councillor Rao. I think that kind of sums up how I'm looking at it as well. And I'll just add to that if we are looking, if unanimity of opinion is the standard here, we will never get there. I believe, with all respect, and I do thank the people for coming out and speaking, but I do believe that the community has spoken on this one. And that's why I'm going to support what's in front of us. Councillor Liu, do you want to, here you go.
Thanks.
There you go.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, this is a beginning, not an end. Our job is to keep the community safe, and setting up rules of engagement is one of our jobs to do that. Articles are not definitions, so item 2 does not contradict item number 1. As Councillor Galander has already said, it's actually enshrined in the underlying documents that it's never meant to prevent you from saying things about a different country or different whatever the the leadership of the country and their actions and what they're doing. Of course, we need to think critically. We need to be able to teach our kids to think critically. We need to stand up for things that are bad, and that's what this is about. It's standing against things that are bad. Truth and Reconciliation is a standalone document, so the fact that it's not entrenched into this as well is neither here nor there. We will look at Truth and Reconciliation on its own merits and on its own mission, which is what we as a council will do down that road. This does remind me a little bit when we start saying, well, it doesn't have everything or it doesn't really speak to me. It reminds me of the poem, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." And that's on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. But we're not getting into geopolitics here. We're not condoning government actions. What we are is setting out what behavior is acceptable here in Richmond, and we're working to keep our community safe, and that's what we're doing here today. Thank you.
All right, with that, I'm going to call the question on the motion that you have in front of you. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillors Heed, Wolf, and Day opposed. That brings us to the last item of business, which is the campaign financing disclosure statements, the failure to file. Staff recommends that the report titled Campaign Financing Disclosure Statement for 2022 General, Local, and School Election Failure to File, dated February 7th, 2023, from the Chief Election Officer be received for information by Richmond City Council in accordance with the requisite act. And I would so move.
Second.
Just for the public, this is a report brought to us directly from our election officials. There is a disclosure statement that every candidate for local government office has to complete. The staff report shows that there was one candidate only who didn't file the requisite document. The results of that would be is that person can't in the future run for office, which frankly is pretty unfortunate. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to public announcements. First of all, we have the spring program registration. It's the time of the year when registration for popular spring activities takes place. Beginning tomorrow, people can register for aquatics and other programs online. For Wednesday, registration can be in person or through the City Hall call center. So if you want details on that, go to our city website, richmond.ca/register. Then this coming weekend is going to be Family Day. This weekend marks Family Day in BC, and over 60 free family-friendly activities are planned online and throughout Richmond. So if you want to see what's available, lots of different activities for the family and especially for the kids, is richmond.ca/Family Day. We also have the Richmond Children's Art Festival, and that festival returns in full on Monday, February 20th, with a program of free, fun, and hands-on activities. Kids 12 years old and younger can enjoy a wide range of performances and hands-on workshops led by professional artists and performers at the Richmond Cultural Center. So if you want information on that one, go to childrensartfestival.ca. Then we have Pink Shirt Day once again on February 22nd. Richmond community is encouraged to wear pink to support anti-bullying efforts locally and across Canada. Awareness activities will take place at community centers, schools, and libraries across the city. So go to the website if you want details of that. And finally, we have the 2023 Richmond Neighborhood Celebration Grant Program. The applications for those neighborhood celebration grants are now open, and we mentioned some of this during the time we talked about the various grants tonight. The city offers up to $2,000 in support for groups of neighbors not-for-profit organizations, school-based groups, and as well as local artists to create events that connect residents and build community here in our city. Applications are being accepted until February 26th. So again, go to the city website if you want some more details. So now I'll go to Councillor Howe.
Your Worship. So we all know about the earthquake that took place in Turkey. I'm pleased to inform that the Canadian International Education Assistance Foundation, CIEAF, has set up a collection booth at Richmond Curling Centre to collect supplies that the victims of the earthquake need. The citizens of Richmond are welcome to drop by and donate items that the earthquake victims need. The hours are from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. from today, Monday, to February the 19th, Sunday. And I'm also pleased to report that on this first day of collection, we collected 2 truckloads of supplies already. It shows how Richmondites are willing to help and ready to contribute for good cause. So to come by, once again, the place is Richmond Curling Centre parking lot. Time is from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. from February 13 to 19.
So what kind of donations are you looking for? Would you accept money? Are there particular items that are particularly useful for this international effort?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. Right now, they are not accepting clothes because they already have too many. What they need most would be blankets, tents, sleeping bags, gloves, socks, thermal cups, diapers for adults and babies. So those are the items that they need most right now. And the items should be new because, you know, for obvious reasons that they only accept new items. So those are the items that we collect at the Richmond Curling place.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hobbs.
Oh, no, Your Worship, sorry, you asked the question.
Okay. With that, bylaws for adoption, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 bylaws for final adoption with no noted opposition.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, post carried. Development Permit Panel.
And there are 2 recommendations for Council's consideration. Recommendation 1, that the minutes of the Development Permit Panel meeting held on December 14th, 2022, and the Chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on April 29th, 2022, be received for information. And number 2, that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of development permit for the properties at 4100 Vanguard Road be endorsed and the permit so issued.
So moved. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We're now adjourned.